What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Apartment 113 podcast, where we talk with cool folks in the cannabis and psychedelics industry to learn about their projects and celebrate their successes. My name is Rob Sanchez, and this is episode 11, the 420 special. We're joined today by the managing director of Ganjier and master of connoisseurship, Derek Gilman. Derek offers some valuable insight on cannabis culture, connoisseurship, and community. Learn more about the Ganjier Program at ganjier.com. That's GANJIER.com. Enjoy the show and happy 420. Derek, thank you, man, for coming on and welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob. I'm grateful for the opportunity, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation in the making, as we'll explain here. I'm happy to connect with you and talk about connoisseurship and Ganjier and just the cannabis industry overall. It's been a fun year. We're only a quarter in, and there's been some new states pushing legalization, some changes across the board, but also just growing pains for the industry overall.
Yeah, there's the cannabis industry is ever evolving. As old as cannabis is, and as long as people have been consuming it, we had that 100-year kind of pause button through prohibition, and as a result, it's an industry still trying to find its legs in many ways.
Yeah, the 100 years of stigma really takes a long time to clear away. It's not as simple as changing the rec laws or changing a few governmental perspectives. It's kind of embedded in society.
Yeah, stigma, I think, mostly rests with the older generations that were subjected to the propaganda, whether it be
the reefer madness.
Yeah, my grandparents that were subjected to reefer madness, or my generation that got put through, that had to tolerate the Reagan administration and the DARE program that Nancy rolled out. It seems that the war on drugs is finally starting to diminish, and I think there's a lot of the younger folks today.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of younger people that look at cannabis and they roll their eyes, and are you kidding me?
That we would have had such a societal argument over the last few decades over it, just on a substance similar to alcohol or similar to other more therapeutic things than alcohol, even bringing some benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at caffeine. Okay,
True.
Caffeine is an incredibly powerful drug. If you ever want to see how powerful caffeine is, just look at the line outside of Starbucks. You see all these people first thing in the morning. Everybody's in the line, head down, just give me the fix. I just need the fix.
Yeah. And then our legislation around caffeine is slim to none across the board. It'd be crazy if you could see really which coffee plant your coffee came from. The package tag and the metric tracking we have for cannabis. If that were around for coffee or for a bowl of cereal, all the back of the box would be an audit log and warning text.
Those products would be a lot more expensive, and it would take a lot longer for them to get to you because the supply chain would be all screwed up as well.
Oh yeah,
over-regulation is never good.
Right.
I mean, we could turn a black market for tomatoes if we wanted to, if we started over-regulating tomatoes.
Hey, if you need to get an underground ketchup and salsa market started, maybe we could talk about that after the episode. But yeah, I think that harkens to the tomato model that Ed Rosenthal has talked about, where the proper legislation and regulations for cannabis is similar to tomato plants. You can grow them if you want, or you can buy them or buy products made out of them. It kind of frees the playing field there without having to fall in line and pay your dues as heavily.
Yeah, the stigmas are easing. Restrictions will ease over time as well.
Right. Yeah. Especially seeing that Missouri has come online this year and with a bang as well, generating just an insane amount of revenue as all of the state of Kansas goes there as well. But it's crazy to see the Midwest finally joining the West and the East Coast and taking a note out of Colorado's book. I think Colorado's been kind of in a like a wasteland or a desert of cannabis laws. But now that Oklahoma and Missouri's there,
Let's not kid ourselves. Cannabis is consumed everywhere on the planet, whether it's legal or not. It has been for a long time and will continue to be. It's just up to the legislators getting on the team and understanding that the easiest way to wrap your arms around something and have more control is to make it legal and not keep it illegal.
right, right. It feels that getting legislators to understand or spreading the awareness and education throughout the industry is something that everyone, I think, agrees on. Everyone that's in our types of positions or in companies like ours, but maybe it's easier said than done. And to actually spread that awareness or to take action towards educating, take something a little more serious and perhaps a little more along the lines of the Ganjier program.
Yeah, and Ganjier is certainly less about political advocacy and more about the fun stuff about cannabis.
The
It's more about
passion and the love
degustation.
there.
It's more about how cannabis um, interacts with our senses. What makes cannabis desirable? The aroma, the flavor, the experience it imparts on us. That's more what Ganjier is about, and training people to be able to help and guide others in their choices to make sure they make the decisions that align with their goals.
Right, and being able to appreciate the plant as more than a commodity or more than a utility, but those nuances like the different appearance, aroma, and flavors you can get, I think serve to deepen the experience overall. You can take kind of that initial level of connoisseurship for any cannabis consumer, and after a little bit of conversation around aroma effects, you can see them start to take the next steps down and kind of find that almost like, I hate to say pretentious, but it's like there's something about connoisseurship where you know a lot about whatever it is you're rating, whether it be books or wine or cigars, that you have that confidence to tell good flower from bad flower or a nice aroma from a poor one. And it seems like the more you talk about it and start thinking about it, the more that it feels more natural to really break the product down. I think before the Ganjier program, I was aware of some of the aroma and flavors, but I had not looked too much at the real differences in effects. I definitely knew the, sedative versus a little more upper, but really trying to diagnose how those effects come on. I think for me, it always feels like they're kind of creeping up, like over the top of my head or kind of down from my eyes. I can't explain it quite, but it's been a good experience trying to decipher that or even put words on a feeling that I just sort of accepted before.
Ultimately, Rob, it comes down to more than just getting high. Okay?
Indeed.
It's more than just getting high. It's no different than, the beer market. You could turn the clock back to the 1970s and it was all just about getting drunk. Okay? The flavor really wasn't something that people were paying a whole lot of attention to. But as that market matured, as the consumers got an appreciation for those other qualities in beer that made it desirable, the aroma, the flavor, roll the clock forward to today, and you can just see, there's hundreds of microbrewery companies out there, all making a very specialized product that they're all very proud about because of those differences, because of that aroma, that flavor. Um, yeah,
Right.
so it's only a matter of time before the cannabis market begins to mature and evolve, and we're already beginning to see some of the signs of that. We're seeing it. We're seeing the conversation shift from what's the THC content to what's the terpene content, right? That conversation really wasn't happening much outside of some very tight circles a few years ago. And now that conversation is moving more and more into the forefront.
Yeah, just we're biting off little pieces of that entourage effect, huh? To focus on as an industry, and probably none of them are the right one to focus exclusively on. Cannabis is very unique in that it has so many psychoactive and non-psychoactive compounds, but the consumer and from an outside cannabis perspective, I think needs to take things kind of incrementally. You can't just throw them in that pool of the entourage effect, and it's harder to describe if you don't have something to hang your hat on, which I think the industry tried to use THC percentage and CBD first. And I think California now shows the terp percentage on their labels in the state, at least the overall, and so does Missouri and a few others.
So connoisseurship begins with awareness of these differences. It then moves into an appreciation for these differences. And then ultimately it moves to, how do I maximize these differences? How do I achieve the best flavor in the cannabis? Either through the tools that I'm using in the consumption, the methods that I'm using, the techniques that I'm using through the consumption.
Right. So even the quality of the product itself isn't the end all be all of connoisseurship. It comes down to the ritual and the process, the tools and consumption methods, the grinder or the mill that you use, and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a nut when it comes to the tools. My grinder, since you mentioned grinder, I use a stainless steel grinder. I'm not a fan of the aluminum grinders. We know aluminum shavings aren't healthy to get
Yes.
into your system, especially for the nervous system. So that said, yeah, I use a stainless steel grinder. The thing weighs about like 2.5 pounds. Anytime somebody goes to pick it up, it's like, whoa.
They're surprised at first, huh? Yeah,
Yeah.
the little shout out to Flour Mill. I've been using one of those for a little while, which uses a milled top instead of teeth, so that it breaks the flour down without cutting so much and without kind of letting some of those volatile terpenes free. I think there's some testing that needs to be done there to really make that claim, but I'm enjoying it, and it definitely has that heft to it that it feels nice when you're reaching for it in the ritual and you're using it in the workspace or on your tray or lap. And I
I've
think
seen a few
that
of those mills around. Do you find yourself having to clean it more or less often?
I will say that if the flour is particularly sticky, which it is in many cases, there's a good deal of cleaning on the top of the mill that needs to be done, like with a toothbrush or something a little more than you'd have to just pick out of a toothed grinder. So I think the weighing one versus the other is maybe not the right conversation. I think they're probably doing the same job with slightly different form factor and kind of experience around it.
Do you find you get a finer or coarser material that comes out of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The mill here has a different size milling plates, so you could put smaller or larger ones. I will say it seems more consistent, but should do a side by side with the old Sharpstone and take a look.
So you can customize the coarseness of the grind with that based on the plates that you're using. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I tend to prefer a coarser grind. I find that the larger, those larger pieces tend to preserve the flavor a bit more versus something that's been very finely ground. I tend to smoke joints, and as you know, as you're smoking a joint, you've got the heat, right there at the cherry, and that hot smoke and air is being drawn through on each hit. And I find with the more finely ground material that you tend to get more of a pre-vaporization occurring throughout that material before it's
Oh, so the
combusted.
first few hits you pull are kind of dragging all the flavor right away.
Well, I find it happens more so with finely ground versus coarse ground, and that's just in my own personal experience.
Yeah,
Because obviously with that coarser ground material, maybe you get some hot air and smoke going around the outside of those chunks, but it's not going to penetrate the core of those little chunks until they've been combusted, and then it opens up the flavor that's kind of residing within.
Right.
That's my theory anyway.
Hey, it's a good theory to me. I think that something else I learned in the Ganjier program about joints and rolling your own, being able to appreciate the cannabis flower at kind of every temperature level is very unique about the joint, versus other consumption methods like a bong that's being hit by the lighter or flame right away, or a dab, or other things there.
The
I don't
joint
know
as a
that.
method of combustion is uniquely a combination of combustion and vaporization because of the fact of that hot air and smoke traveling through the material that is yet to be combusted. And so you do start to get some of those more highly volatile compounds um, along the way. Um,
Right, kind of from every stage all at once to really experience that flower, or try to
additional,
at least, huh?
yeah, you also get a buildup of, the oils and resins, from the earlier hits that build up later on into it. And so you tend to get this evolution of the flavor from that first third of that joint to the second third to that final third, that kind of adds, different dimensions of complexity.
Some stages there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that to boot on the rolling your own side, once you master rolling a nice joint, maybe with a little bit of conage or like a little shape to it, it feels great. It's a good part of the ritual just by itself. I mean, once you roll it yourself and you get a clean burning roll and you're just satisfied with it from flower to pre-roll, I will say that's kind of like a keystone or like a little pillar for connoisseurship as well, just mastering the technique.
There were some amongst the Ganjier Council that advocated for requiring all Ganjier candidates to demonstrate the ability to roll a joint
Oh, on the spot
before
rolling.
being yeah, before they could earn their certification. Um,
Yeah.
we do not make that a requirement because it turns out there's some students that go through the program that vaporize exclusively, and they are
Right.
specialists and experts when it comes to vaporizing.
For
And
finding that
so,
right temperature or the right
yeah,
methods there too.
yeah, and so requiring someone who's never going to smoke a joint to have the ability to roll one just didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Though I can tell you about 80, at least 8 out of 10, if not 9 out of 10 students that come through the program are joint smokers.
Yeah, that's what I noticed being up there too. I think we had one guy with a spoon pipe still that preferred not to roll, but I think that yeah, it's an element of consumption and of cannabis consumerism that kind of comes along with the experience too. You know, new to the plant, new to the industry, buying a pre-roll is easy, it's quick, it's ready for you, and most of the time it's cheap because it's shake or kind of poor quality flour in there unless you're buying premium. But once you're able to make those yourselves and get deeper into it, I think that's just another toe in the water of connoisseurship. I
Yeah,
think
of course, it's like, for the coffee drinkers out there, to go back to that analogy, um, do you prefer your coffee to be pre-ground, far in advance of when you're going to make and brew that cup? Or do you prefer to, have that bean ground up right
freshly ground
before
in the
it's
morning.
brewed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I think that your approach towards connoisseurship in the toolkit is unlike any that I've seen before. It was news to me, and I'm still trying to seek out similar tools. I think when I met, you had the joint ring for your finger that had the little sliding guy on it
Yep.
with a top hat
Sir
and with
smokes a
your
lot.
exactly. How could I forget a name like that? So yeah, Sir smokes a lot, riding on the little joint clip on your ring, and I saw your golden tray as well, and more. How did you fall into this kind of way of bringing back antique smoking devices and tools into the more modern cannabis realm?
A close friend of mine that I went to college with um, down at Tulane many, many moons ago, he had an antique lighter. It was a Dunhill, it's an antique Dunhill lighter. and it just made an impression on me. I loved the style, I loved the class that it brought. I loved the uniqueness of the lighter itself, that it wasn't something that everybody else had. And over time, began to seek out various antique tools to complement my daily consumption regimen. And now I have, an antique rolling tray, the finger ring cigarette holder. I've got these match safes. I've begun using matches to light my joints, and so I have these antique match safes. Collection of those. I've gone deep down the antique consumption tool rabbit hole. Over time, I got to be honest though, I realized that I wasn't looking for collections of each of these items.
Right.
That for me, I just wanted the coolest, most unique one I could find to use on a daily basis. I don't have a shelf that I like to go and look at this shelf of stuff. I like to use it. That's where I get my enjoyment from. And so over time, I've pared my items down to just being the finest examples I could find in each of these items. And that's what I use on a regular basis now.
So kind of keeping it in the regular rotation and not building a showroom of your old bongs and antiques and collectibles.
A bunch of stuff that just, that's going to collect dust. And I get the enjoyment from the actual using of it. I love having that antique, finger ring cigarette holder, with Sir Smokes-a-Lot on it. And just knowing that it's over 120 years old. Okay.
Crazy to think all the smoking and conversation that was had over that ring.
Yeah. For me, that just has a lot more character, and I have a lot of fun with it.
I think it's a ton of potential there in the crystal and goldware and things that came from kind of that early era of cigarettes that hasn't quite found mainstream popularity. I know a lot of folks fall into just the most accessible brands, the national brands, these folks that are pushing all their marketing out there. It can be rewarding or intrinsic by itself just to find something on your own, or like you mentioned, to know that you have something unique or that's rare in the room.
Yeah. So Seth Rogen, I know he likes to collect antique ashtrays.
Nice.
That's one of the things he's into, and he went on to develop, that houseplant company that makes some what they call connoisseur level tools, and they are a step up from the average tool. However, I would suggest to people, if you're into personalizing your experience, don't go out to just whatever brand is building something. Cigarettes were used for a long time, and there are lots of neat ashtrays in every type of material, from hand-blown glass to sterling silver to everything in between. Ashtrays, the cigarette holders, cigarette cases, various lighters. Why use that Bic lighter with that shitty fuel that they put in there when you can go and get yourself some neat older antique lighter? And there's lots of them out there in every budget. Okay, you don't need a lot of money to get yourself a cool antique lighter. And now you could fill it up with some high-grade filtered butane, and all of a sudden now you're getting tastier hits because you're not using that cheap fuel anymore.
Yeah, so it's the conversation isn't always about smoking more as a connoisseur. It's actually about smoking better, or smoking or getting more out of that smoke from your side.
Elevating the enjoyment of your experience. And that can mean different things to different people. For me, I get enjoyment from handling the antique tools and using them. I get enjoyment from working on my techniques and methods to improve the flavor, maximize the flavor that I'm getting. And perhaps that's everything from, toasting my joint to light it rather than drawing the flame in, okay,
Yes.
which could contaminate the flavor of the joint. So I toast it to help preserve some flavor. And then I take light puffs on that joint, because I don't want to draw in too much heat from that cherry, as I mentioned earlier, because it'll pre-vaporize a lot of those flavors. You could draw real hard on those first couple hits and get a couple of really tasty hits, but the balance of that joint will have lost its flavor because you pulled it out too soon.
It's going to be pretty harsh the rest of the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing to point out there as well, that the connoisseurship, even with the tools side, it's at every price level. And with cannabis products too, there's a way to appreciate quality really at any bracket. It's not something that's reserved for like premiumization or for top shelf products only. I think having connoisseurship or having that mindset around your products at any level, and maybe products in any industry, is approachable. Or possible.
There's value propositions everywhere, and then it depends on what kind of researcher you are, because there's lots of different places to acquire things. And so if you're really into hunting stuff down, you can find exactly what you're looking for, and usually, find it at the price that you can afford as well.
Right. And man, as soon as we can sell, or as soon as products can move across state borders, there will be a whole nother realm of connoisseurship and hunting things down. I can't imagine being able to say, okay, I want to find this like Durban poison from Humboldt County, like outdoor grown. And I also want to get something from, Florida, like some Triangle Kush, like down in its homeland, and be like smoking those on the same tray, or, appreciating both those terroirs or those differences in their cultivars.
How about when the international markets open up?
Ooh,
and
Hindu Kush.
And the Santa Marta Gold starts coming back, or the Thai stick starts coming back.
Yeah, it's just unreal. I think that those days would be pretty wild, like from a purchasing perspective. Like you just open up the e-commerce online and say like, well, which country am I ordering delicious cannabis from today? It's going to be unreal to think that, we used to be limited to only our state licenses.
Pay attention to the supply chain when you as people start reaching out, or when that happens, how it's been handled. It can be grown right, it can be cured right, but if it doesn't get handled right from the time that it leaves the cultivator to the time it gets to the consumer, bad things can happen, and good quality
a lot can go wrong in that supply chain
in quick order.
Yeah, definitely.
Point being, try and get it as farmer direct as you can, with as less middle people in between. The more you can get it directly from the farmer, the less opportunity there is for it to have been mishandled along the way.
Right, for mistakes or poor treatment with storage, light, temperature, everything in between can impact those delicious trichome heads that you want intact on your sample or on your flower. Yeah. Well, what do you say we light up here today? We're dropping this as a 420 episode. I think we can consume a little bit and maybe burn one here and talk shop with the listeners a little bit more.
Let's do it. All right. Let me break out my.
I've got some NYC diesel here from a company in Las Vegas called Polaris that I've really enjoyed the flower they put out.
Oh, wow.
They have a head cheese that has one of the terps in it, I think it's myrcene, is over 20 milligrams per gram. It's just a juicy cultivar, and their supply chain seems to be on point because it stays juicy. Every time it's the same thing. I think consistency is kind of hard in agriculture in general, but with cannabis, to get that same flavor and appearance and everything, a lot of work has to be done there. A lot has to be maintained.
Definitely. I've heard Kevin Jodrey, that cannabis needs to be treated like microgreens effectively in order to preserve, those finer qualities that it has, just because most of those flavor and aroma compounds are just highly volatile.
Right. That even without ill intent, they can be disrupted, or even without the thought there, can really set it down a bad path.
Just an hour in a warm truck.
Right.
Done.
That's all it takes for you to get a great smell when you open the jar, and then nothing else
And then
after
where'd it
that.
go? Where'd it go? It was so loud when I opened it.
Yes. Yeah, I think we've all had that product before. Unfortunately, the supply chain in the industry is something that's still being worked out. I think distributors and manufacturers are doing their best to treat the product well, but sometimes there's margins and budgeting and every other variable that kind of gets in the way there.
Yeah, they're gonna need refrigerated trucks and refrigerated storage rooms and
Which, yeah, it just adds to the operating costs too, with shrinking margins that then makes the conversation even tighter.
no
the
fun.
the lovely industry that we're in.
No fun. Let's talk more about connoisseurship. That's a funner topic.
Definitely, yeah.
I
I think
honestly, I don't personally pay a whole lot of attention to the cannabis industry. Um,
right,
more,
being able to address it just from the point of advocacy and speaking with people that have passion and the interest to become a Ganjier helps to insulate you from some of that. I think.
I just enjoy geeking out on the assessment process, really paying attention to those nuances in the aroma, um, working on developing my palate, um, identifying, being able to pick out what those aromas are, to other relatable.
Yeah, I think that was something very interesting we talked about in the program is trying to find those experiences or those other aromas and flavors that you can define or that you have and like linking the same thing to the cannabis product that you're smoking. I think at first a consumer can be almost overwhelmed by the terpene and the taste of cannabis flower. Just it can taste kind of like burnt herbal or like kind of skunky that it's almost too hard for them to tell that there's more flavors behind that if you peel back the layers or dive deeper to find the hints of citrus or different herbs that can present themselves in cannabis aroma.
It takes time to develop the palate. It's for first time consumers. It may be easier to discern those flavors through a vaporizer. Okay,
uh,
without the combustion happening, there is less smoke to have to filter through. Um, I vaporized exclusively for 4 years. I smoked for 20 years leading up to my 4 year vaporizing experiment, but I vaporized exclusively for 4 years. I really enjoyed it. I did notice that certain cultivars, the flavors would transition through better than others, where certain ones would smell great but just didn't taste like anything through the vaporizer. Um, I
yeah.
smoked a joint for the first time after 4 years, and I forget what the occasion was, but I got higher than I had been in that 4 years of vaporizing and realized I had been missing something.
uh,
It's tasted like ash. But over the next 6 months, 4 to 6 months, I was able to redevelop and get my joint palate back.
yeah, you kind of have to get used to whatever that method is that you consume and from there you can explore the nuances deeper. I think even changing the joint paper can really throw me for a loop sometimes, and just put a different taste on the whole thing.
What kind of papers you use, Rob?
Right now, elements. Been bouncing around a few different things, but I know that there are fine rice paper alternatives.
I use the club rolling papers, the gumless club
Gum,
rolling papers
yeah,
that they don't
dude.
even really make anymore. Um,
I need to
if
try those sometime. Without the gum, how does it actually close? Do you need to overlay it a little bit so that it keeps itself down long enough for you to clamp it, or is there a trick to that?
There is a trick actually. So the clubs they come in different sizes. They come in a single width size, which is just a standard rolling paper size, and then they make double wides, which are the ones I tend to go for. With the double wides, they're pre-folded down the middle. And what I'll do is I'll just lick along that, I'll just run that fold along the edge of my tongue, and then I'll tear them in half, effectively taking that double wide and making it a single wide paper. But through that tearing process, that licking and tearing process, the fibers of the paper become exposed. You get that torn edge. Those fibers, once licked, when you're rolling the joint, you're ready for that final seal, those fibers serve as the glue.
Can get some traction a little bit.
They actually, those fibers will actually just kind of grab on, like paper mache, kind of how it kind of holds on to itself.
Yeah, that is good advice. I need to try that again. I think my first one was just coming undone as I was, as I'm lighting it, as I'm
for the
smoking
thing,
it.
you have to tear it. What I learned is it helps to moisten before you tear. You get more fibers that kind of come up through that process as well, as opposed to just tearing it. On the single wide ones, you got to fold down that top edge just ever so slightly, and then you just run that edge along your tongue, and then you can tear that tiny little strip off the top, and then still get that torn edge.
Still get that rough piece. Yeah.
Yep, that's the trick.
Hey, I'll try them next time. But you said clubs are not made, or they're hard to track down?
They stopped making them. Yeah, so you can go on eBay and find old stock.
Buy them up now, man. Yeah.
They were the lightest paper made at the time. I think the elements come close, but it was effectively 10 grams per square meter, which is exceptionally light and thin paper.
So thin, yeah.
Yeah.
I think my daily driver actually is a vaporizer with the Puffco. I tend to smoke concentrates, like on the preferring solventless, but they're hard to find in Las Vegas. But right. I definitely appreciate that the different palette you get from combustion and vaporization, though. I think there's something about the joint as it burns down, as that complete flavor comes, that's just a different experience than that clean, quick vaporizer hit, which is sometimes preferable as well, or that one burst of flavor versus the longer run.
Yeah, and the effects themselves tend to be different too.
Yeah, I can see a lot of that. The more sedative effects, I think, come in a little bit more in the joint, a little bit more in the blunt or the combustion side, versus maybe a headier run on the vape.
Agreed.
So, did you always smoke, Derek, all the way from your early teenage years, or did you start consuming cannabis in college?
So cannabis was in my bloodstream before I exited the womb. My parents were a couple of hippies, and there was cannabis smoke in the air the entire time my mom was pregnant. Some of my earliest memories are being in a darkened living room with my folks and their friends sitting in a smoke circle, as the hippies used to like to do back in the day, and being just a link in the chain, making sure that roach got over to the next person. And I wasn't pulling off a hit, when I was 5 years old, but I was just passing it along. So cannabis was always around. I came home from school in the third grade one day, and there was hay bale size bales of cannabis, weed. There was 4 of them. I remember 4 hay bales in the house when I came home from school that day.
Oh, man.
Yeah. That said, I didn't try cannabis until my sophomore year of high school, which at the time was a bit later than many of my friends.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it just didn't... do you think having it so open or kind of so available made it less of a forbidden fruit kind of effect for you?
Exactly. It just wasn't taboo in my household. My parents weren't the most motivated individuals, and so it was one of those, hey, I don't want to be like them sort of situations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think,
Yeah, I love my parents, and they were great, and they were always very good to me. Don't get me wrong, but I had higher ambitions.
yeah, dude, definitely up to some ambitious work now. Pushing connoisseurship and ushering some cannabis advocates forward. How was it to go about designing the assessment protocol or figuring out a way to take this abstract idea of quality flower relatively and find those concrete points and working into the assessment?
I did a lot of research. Fortunately, we had um, each of these other gustatory-based industries from which we could, draw knowledge and inspiration from. Coffee, wine, chocolate, cheese, cigars. Each of these industries have trained professionals and their own assessment protocols for quantifying the quality of each of those products. And so I began with researching each of those, how they went about doing what they did. Quickly realized that it was, the interaction with the senses that degustation was all about, and what really, um, defined desirability: the appearance, the aroma, the flavor. And once I had those categories, it was just, identifying the criteria within each of those categories. Um, and
Yeah,
again,
I
like
imagine a lot starts on that list at first for what
it
you.
was a big, I grew up around cannabis, but beyond that, my dad taught me how to grow when I was in junior high school. Even before I was smoking it, I learned how to grow
Oh,
cannabis,
okay.
and so just having that deep history and experience to rely on, and then ultimately bringing in, the 17 other members of the Ganjier Council.
Yes,
Um,
and what a
with
council, right?
over 600 years of combined experience within the Ganjier Council, coming from different areas of expertise. We get the scientist in Dr. Jeffrey Raber. We get the multi-generational cultivator in Wendy Kornberg. We get our solventless expert in Nick T. We get our hashish expert in Frenchie. We got, Kev with his deep experience that, Kev has. Um, and
Right.
so
It's
I
a
built an initial working prototype that we all sat down with and massaged from there.
okay. So it's a group effort then from the council to really decide how these criteria affect the score and how the assessment breaks down.
Yeah, I built the initial framework. I will take credit because I did do the work. I
Yeah.
built the initial framework from which, the bulk of it is still intact.
Right. And then
It was just, it
based
was
on
some tweaking.
feedback.
It was, yeah, this criteria is not necessary. Oh, you're missing this criteria. Aha. These should be scored and these we shouldn't score. We should just identify these. That's where a lot of the debate and happened.
Yeah. Oh man, I imagine those would be fun debates to be a fly on the wall for. As how many folks are part of the council now?
There's a total of 18 members in the Ganjier Council.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, we filmed the Ganjier Council meetings that we had. And so there will hopefully at some point in the future be an opportunity to be that fly on the wall because we've preserved those conversations. And I've watched
Great.
them. I've gone back and I've watched a couple times, and it's fun because you actually feel like you're in the room because nobody's playing to the camera at that point. The cameras were literally just recording the conversations as they were happening.
Nice. It's very very natural then what to watch and almost participate in the as it boils down to these core criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the Ganjier Council is doing next. I know that there have been two additional levels of the Ganjier certificate that are planned, or are they still in the prototype or kind of in the future mode for Ganjier?
Yeah, we are in development on an advanced level to the certification, which is the next level above the certified level. Um, and ultimately, we're going to have an executive level above that, um, tailoring the steps after the Sommelier program. What we're
Nice.
doing right now and what's going to come out next is going to be an introductory level. After having some
Oh,
conversations with the Court of Master Sommeliers, after having some conversations with the fellow that built the Cicerone program, which is the program in beer. It's the equivalent of what we do. We discovered that the best way to accelerate industry adoption is through offering an introductory level. Our certified level as it stands, it takes a commitment. It takes a genuine commitment in time and effort and money to go through. And
yes.
a lot of people, there's only a certain amount of people that are willing to make that a commitment, while there's many others that would be willing to make a much smaller commitment, but would allow us the opportunity to introduce them to cannabis connoisseurship, introduce them to our assessment protocol. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an awesome step forward there. I know that, having walked the path now to the certified Ganjier status, it was an endeavor doing the studying before, making sure to pass that test with flying colors and be ready to assess flower live. I think it was a wonderful experience and something that I really appreciate and am happy that I did. But I can see that having an introductory level could definitely help push the fronts and the knowledge and just awareness as well about the program. I think that's awesome. And yeah, dude, I'm happy that you came back on. I think we can tell the story here of the original first episode of Apartment 113, the lost episode. Or when I first had the podcast started, Derek here was my first guest, and we recorded a wonderful episode talking all about connoisseurship and the Ganjier program. That went south as my voice was not recorded through the whole thing. And I think that was actually a sober recording, believe it or not.
Sober recording. All I know, we had a wonderful conversation, Rob. I was on my A game that day. It was similar topics that we covered today, but there were some different ones too. And we get to the end of the interview, and you say, "Wait, hold on, I just got to check something." And I remember, I think there was an uh-oh in there, and you went on to go and tell me that, unfortunately, and your exuberance of beginning the interview, the recording, unfortunately, didn't get preserved.
Yeah, there was this feeling of heat, I think, as I saw that cross across the microphone while it was colored red, realizing the impact there as we came around the corner. And I think it was right as you were explaining that at one time recording High Rollers that you had the lens cap on, which I think that made me check just to double check. And man, what an episode. And I'm going to play some of that after this interview with the gaps and all, just to have a little Easter egg for the listeners.
Cool. That would be fun.
But great, man. Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. And where can folks find out more about you and the Ganjier Council and Ganjier Program?
Quite simply, you can go to ganjier.com. That's GANJIER.com for more info about the Ganjier Program. For more info about me, you can go on to my social channels on either Instagram or LinkedIn. Just look up my name, Derek Gilman. Find out a little bit more about me. I don't spend a whole lot of time on social, to be honest with you, though.
Hey, it's probably for the best, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
well,
thanks
happy
again, Derek.
420, everybody. And happy 420 to you, Rob. Thank you so much again for having me today. What's next on your 420 agenda, man? Las Vegas on 420 sounds like a whole lot of madness.
Yeah, it's definitely chaos. I'll be doing some earlier shopping than that. Thanks again, Derek.
Take care of you.
Thank you for listening to the Apartment 113 podcast. For more information about the show and our range of services, visit apt113.com. We offer cannabis operations consulting, agile product management, and connoisseurship services. With over a decade of experience in the cannabis industry, Apartment 113 is here to help.
The Ganjier Program has been effectively a passion project of mine for the last few years now, and genuinely pleased to see the recognition that it's received, um, and frankly, the success that we've had, um, training people to become certified Ganjiers. Um, and for me, the measure of success is is hearing the feedback from the graduates that have gone through the program, from the students that have gone through the program, and just hearing time after time how we met and or exceeded their expectations when they initially signed on for the program. So it's been very gratifying. We weren't exactly sure how it would be accepted, in all honesty, Rob. Um, we reached out to each of the members of the Ganjier Council, um, told them what our idea and plans were, um, and each of them understood what we were hoping to achieve. And the question then was, could we build what we were setting out to achieve, which was rather ambitious? Um, and then ultimately, would people sign on, to become part of this program? That before we really started, pushing our marketing campaign, many people didn't even know what the word Ganjier was or how to say it. Yeah, that was really one of the driving motivations um, behind assembling the Ganjier Council, was actually twofold. Um, was to bring in experts in um, with various skill sets and areas of expertise to paint this well-rounded curriculum canvas that we were looking to put together, but also to identify well-known, well-respected individuals within the cannabis community and cannabis industry that could not only endorse but ultimately validate the curriculum that we had put together. Seed to smoke. We're beyond sales, seed to smoke, because as you know, the course also covers connoisseurship as the extracurricular course, in the program. Effective. What's been on my lately? Um, I'm happy to say I've begun harvesting some of my plants for this season and have just begun sampling. The Cherry West was the first plant to come down this year. Freeborn Selections Genetics, Mean Gene from Mendocino, whom I absolutely love. And yeah, I grew out his Cherry West this year, which did phenomenal in my new environment up here in southern Humboldt. And it's been some super tasty smoke so far. Just this really incredibly deep and rich um, cherry aroma that just directly translates through to the palate and to the flavor. It's been a lot of fun, and it's got this incredibly greasy, um, tactile quality to it, which makes it interesting to kind of roll, because you go to roll it up, it doesn't really want to stick together so much. It kind of wants to fall apart, but not because it's overly dry, but because of this more kind of greasy, this greasy resin quality that it has to it. The tuck and roll. Yeah, the tuck and roll is tricky. I'll tell you something really interesting I noticed. The first joint I rolled with this Cherry West, I had finished it up and I was letting it sit, to dry for a minute. And I went back to smoking maybe 10 minutes after I'd rolled it. And I had noticed the paper had begun turning translucent, had gone from this opaque white paper to this translucent paper where I could completely see all the cannabis inside, the color of the cannabis inside. It had made, like, again, that greasy, it was like oil had been applied to the paper. And it was like see-through. And I can't recall ever seeing that before. Yeah, you'll see that, typically after you begin to combust the joint and you begin to burn it, some of those oils start to work their way through. You'll get some of that, browning or translucent quality to the paper. I can't remember seeing it before on a joint I hadn't sparked up yet. I'll explain why it's my preferred method, as well as the preferred method of nearly every person on the council. Save, well, Nikki Listretto, Swami's partner in Swami Select. Nikki, unfortunately, was diagnosed with COPD, the early stages of COPD a few years back. And after a lifetime of the joint being her preferred method of consumption, her hand was forced and she actually converted over to vaporizing. Um, but be, yeah, yeah, she's been enjoying it. I know she's been enjoying moving over to vaporizing. I know she misses joints too because she's mentioned as much. But to answer your question, um, the joint, unlike any other method of inhalation of cannabis flower, is uniquely not only a method of combustion, obviously, we're lighting that thing, but the joint also serves as a vaporization tool as well. And effectively, each hit that you take from a joint is some of that combusted material, that smoke, but the heat, just to the inside of that cherry, that hot air, that hot smoke being drawn through the rest of the joint, depending on how long you're pulling in any given hit, depending on how intense you're pulling, how strongly you're pulling in any given hit, can affect the level of vaporization on the balance of that joint and how much of that flower vapes out, before it's even combusted. Uh, yeah, cigar smokers, who effectively, consume cigars exclusively for flavor, learned along the way that heat management is critical to that flavor experience. Um, the cigar, being, rolled in the paper and having that cherry at one end and having the other material on the other end of the cherry, and, is similar to the joint in that sense. And so they're exceptionally careful with the heat source that they use, the method of igniting that cigar, and then the method of smoking that cigar. Again, how strong they pull, how long they pull on any given hit. In short, you want to take, light, short puffs, as opposed to long, hard draws. And pre-vape, you could pre-vape, a significant portion of that joint long before you've ever combusted it. If you've ever gotten to the second half of a joint and the flavor is just completely gone, and maybe the first half of that joint was really flavorful, in all likelihood, it may have been a little bit too aggressive hitting on that thing. So by the time you got to that second half, it was all the good stuff was already vaped out, and you're pretty much just combusting plant material. Yeah, effectively, there's a reason why, again, nearly every expert on the Ganjier Council has elected and chooses the joint as their preferred method of consumption. It's years of experience that have come down to that. Um, we've all used other tools. We've all smoked from the bong. We've all had vaporizers. We've used chillums, hookahs. There's many methods, to inhale cannabis, but there's just something uniquely special about the joint. I haven't done the fumigation tent method yet myself. No, I guess hot boxing is a form of that, right? It's all an evolution. And speaking of evolutions, one of my favorite lessons in the online portion of the Ganjier curriculum was a lesson with Nicotine on consumption of solventless concentrates, and he brought along all these tools that he'd been using over the last couple of decades, and effectively, demonstrated the evolution of consuming solventless concentrates, from the early days of, a titanium swing and a torch. Well, yeah, now you can have a little rig, and you're pushing a button, and it's just going to heat up right to whatever temperature setting you set it to, and you're good to go. There's plenty of, believe me, there's plenty of hash aficionados with scars on their forearms and fingers and hands from playing with those torches, man. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, I mean, how good of an idea is it to take, concentrate multiple doses of concentrated cannabis and be handling a flame torch, some blowtorch. You're getting loaded, holding the torch, passing things around. Yeah, yeah, burns are bound to happen. I think your typical soccer mom is gonna lean towards the vape pen over the blowtorch device. Um, Not to generalize any one group of people, but that would be my best guess. I believe connoisseurship is just beginning to gain greater awareness to a larger segment of the cannabis consuming public. What I mean by that is that there has always been a hardcore contingent of enthusiasts, always, okay, that were into the tools that they used, that were into the techniques and the rituals to elevate and ultimately maximize their consumption experience. I think, when you start seeing people like Seth Rogen coming out with his products, his houseplant products, that comes from a place of connoisseurship. Okay, there's a person who understands that the tools he interacts with has affected his experience, and so he came out with his line of tools to help, elevate others' experience. I don't own any of those products. That's not the type. That's not what I'm into. I'm into the antiques. Um, that's my particular. Brass? How dare you? The pieces I use are either sterling silver or gold. I'm into the precious metal antiques. Is kind of no, that's it's okay. I'm a bit of a nut when it comes to that stuff. But I love re. I People should look to identify the tools that express their individualism, that express their likes, what they're into. I'm into antiques, really cool antique smoking tools. There could be contemporary tools. There could be stuff you make. There could be stuff you repurpose. There's lots of different ways to go about, finding the tools that work best and coming up with your own little toolkit for your consumption ritual.